So, hello everyone. Welcome to this live interview with Shreyash. Today, we are gonna have a very enlightening discussion about how to improve one's score and get to that dream score of 760 on the GMAT, which is basically something which can get you ready for any top school across the globe. So, before we get started, I'm gonna invite Shreyash in a while. But before we get started, I would just want to know more about you. So, please let me know in the chat what kind of score are you at present, what is the target score that you are aiming for in how many days, and if you can hear our voice, like my voice at least clear till now. So if my voice is audible to you perfectly, do let me know in the chat here, and do go about sharing about your current score and what is your target score in the meantime. So that will help us get an idea about what is the current target score that you're aiming for. So I'm yet to see a yes in the chat. If my voice is audible, it will be great to hear from you guys right away. Okay. So great, Rashik. Thank you so much for telling us about the voice. So as I said, this webinar is going to be about how can you improve your score. Shreyas achieved an amazing score improvement from a 640 to 760. So how can you improve your scores like Shreyas? Basically, the entire strategy that he followed, we are gonna discuss that with him now. So without any further ado, let me welcome Shreyash in this live stream. So a warm welcome to you, Shreyash.
Hi
How did
everyone.
you
Hello.
feel
Hi
like?
Piyush.
So how did you feel when you got that 760 on the screen? I know it
Sorry, can you
was
come in?
basically, yeah. I'm saying that. How did you feel when you scored that
I,
760?
I,
I know it's.
hmm. I was really ecstatic because I honestly was not expecting that kind of a score. The benchmark that I had in mind was more around 730 or 740. And the moment the 760 number flashed on my screen, I couldn't even believe it. I was reading it. I read it, I think, close to 2 3 times over and over again just to make sure, am I reading it correctly? But then, yeah, I was really ecstatic after that. And honestly, to be, I did not even expect that. There was, I'm sure, apart from all the effort, there was a bit of luck also involved over here. So finally,
I,
it was
I,
a
I
good.
personally feel, again, we are going to discuss that in the session today, but I
Hmm.
personally feel you are also a little unlucky to an extent. Like when I looked at your enhanced score report, and I was telling you over the call as well that probably this deserves a second, like another attempt. Maybe 770, 780 is on the card, but yeah, I understand 760 is like the dream score that one aims for. So just tell us more about yourself. Like what kind of
Mhm.
colleges are you planning to apply to? Why an MBA at this point of the career?
Right.
Overall.
Right. For me, actually, I was planning to apply for an MBA last year itself, but then because of COVID, a lot of things changed. I wasn't really sure. I was on the fence whether I should go ahead and apply last year or not. So I took the decision to take 1 year, take one more year to make up my mind. And once, when I'm very clear that I want to do an MBA, that only then I'll want to go ahead with it. So yeah, so that's why I shifted the decision from last year to this year. But then the motivation for going ahead and doing an MBA is because uh, I'm really interested in getting some global exposure. I also want to pivot my own career track also from where I am right now. So because of all these broad motivations, I decided to go ahead with an MBA. And coming to the other part of your question, what kind of schools am I applying to? I'm applying to basically, in the first round, I'm targeting a bit more ambitiously, closer, thinking of the top 10, 15 B schools in the US. And
Okay.
based on how the round one responses go, I'll again calibrate and see if there's any need
If
of,
you need to hedge your bets, yeah.
yes. So
No,
yeah,
but
for
I'm
round
pretty
one,
sure.
I'm being a little ambitious
No,
in
no,
choosing
that
schools.
that is definitely required. Definitely, like, see, if you plan your studies right, if you plan your preparation right, and you can apply in round one, you have that luxury of being choosy about the school. So, like, I believe you have applied to you're applying to MIT and Kellogg and Wharton and Harvard is already done,
Yes,
right? This two are already
yes,
done.
yes.
Okay, okay, great, great. All the best for that. I'm sure that 760 will definitely make them look at your application. The essays are done right. I'm pretty sure that you're gonna hear from them about the interview soon. So
I
all the
hope
best for
so.
that. No, that is definitely going to happen. So I'm seeing a lot of questions already flowing in. So I know people are people are getting excited about knowing how did you prepare and all those things. So just to give you an overview, how we have structured this discussion is that we are first gonna start with understanding basically the score improvement plan that Shreyash created. So I see a question from Ronak who says, "What is the total prep time, coaching he availed?" And like Muffin is saying that, "How did you improve your SCN?" CR. So we are definitely going to discuss that. We're going to start with the score improvement planning, like how did Shesh plan his score improvement, and then we will talk about the verbal strategy that he followed that basically led to that verbal 42 that is scored on the GMAT. Then we are going to talk about the quant strategy also. I know a lot of you are not like so many of you did not ask the question around quant, but we'll talk about the quant improvement strategy as well for people who are struggling with quant. And we'll talk about the timing strategies and then additional tips from Shreyash's end. And in the meantime, please feel free to ask any questions that you have. And I will definitely flag some questions to Shreyash right away. When we discuss some questions, we will reserve when we come to that particular portion if it is related to that. For example, Ronak, Banana Muffin, your questions are gonna come up in the answers to this are gonna come up as we discuss. So I'm not taking them right now, but we are gonna take up questions which are relevant to the discussion at that point of time. So please feel free to share any questions that come to your mind. So let's get started from the very beginning, like the journey from 640 to 760. So Shreyash, how was the preparation plan before the first attempt? Like how did you prepare for the first attempt? When did the journey start? How did it start? Like can you talk about that a little?
Sure. Yes. So for my first attempt, I think in totality, I think if I talk about my own preparation, I think I spent close to 3 weeks of preparation before my first attempt. In
Okay.
retrospect, I think that was a little bit. I hurried into my attempt quite. It was a very hurried attempt, giving the GMAT in just 2-3 weeks of preparation. But then, a couple of reasons why I went ahead with that limited amount of preparation was because in the if you when I was giving the original the mock test from GMAT, I used to get a score of around 700 and 710, and there was also this internal pressure that I had created on my own that if I get done with my GMAT faster, I'll have more time to focus on my on the applications. So because of this internal pressure as well as the scores that I was getting on the original on the GMAT mock tests, uh, I was confident that I will get around a 700. I was getting a score of around 700 to 710 on the GMAT mock tests. So I thought that probably if I'm lucky, I can push the score over to closer to 730 or 740 on exam day. So I was a little uh, hopeful that my exam day score would be better than what I
The mock
was getting
scores.
in my mock scores. So it was all in all, it was a hurried attempt going into the
Mhm.
640 attempt. Another thing that I'd like to highlight is, 640 seems like a very low score, and it's primarily because the quant score was, I think, 42 for me. Uh, a quant, and given my preparation, I was expecting more around at least 49, 50, but I even till this day, even I'm not sure, what went wrong on the exam day, which caused me to get a quant
42.
42 kind of score. I'm guessing it was probably I did not manage my break the break that I get between sections properly. It was an offline attempt at the center. So my
Okay.
hypothesis is it's probably I did not manage the time between breaks that well, and that is why I lost some time over there.
No, very, very important lesson. In fact, I was speaking to this one
Mm-hmm.
student day before yesterday, I guess, and she was saying that when she was taking the break between the two sections, quant and verbal, verbal and quant rather, she actually overspent the time. She did not estimate that they will be doing a second check-in when the person is coming back,
Mm-hmm.
and that second check-in took 2 minutes
Yeah.
additional. So she was 2 minutes behind the clock, and then all of that like created a lot of panic. So definitely a very important lesson that when you are taking those breaks, you should not plan for entire 8 minutes. Maybe plan for about five
Correct.
minutes or so, and then come back to your seats like before time. That's always good. Nice.
Yes, I totally agree with that.
So
So that was that time.
yeah. So in the first attempt, like what did you do? Like I understand we understand that 2-3 weeks is what you studied for.
Mm-hmm.
But like
Mm-hmm.
how was your preparation going on in that
Right.
period? Like
Yeah. Mm. So in terms of preparation, I focused more heavily on my verbal. For some reason, I was, in retrospect, I think I was a little overconfident with respect to my own quant preparation. I thought that, I did not spend a significant amount of time, preparing for quant. Specifically, the only quant questions I did was probably a few, 10, 15, a few practice questions, and then only in the mocks. So I think on the quant side, the I did not spend a lot of time, and on the verbal side, I spent a lot of the and almost entire amount of preparation that I did was on the verbal side. Specifically within verbal, if I talk about, let's say, CR and RC, those were two topics that I did not do as such. Did not study much about the approach or the theory as such. I just
Okay.
did a lot of questions to get a hang of, what's asked, what kind of strategy should I apply, etc. When it comes to SC, I refer to, one of the more popular books that probably everyone, that are popularly suggested by, on GMAT Club, etc. All of these forums. So I used one of those books to study. Um, and my in retrospect, I also realized that my SC preparation was more around, trying to understand the different rules that are applicable while you're solving sentence correction problems, rather than focusing more on the approach. I think more I'll try to get more answer more on that in a bit as well. But yeah, all in all, I think that was my preparation over there, more focused towards SC, and within SC also specifically looking at, just understanding the grammar rules, just reading through, a few books that people referred on GMAT Club. That's about that's about it. What I did for my first preparation.
So, what were the lessons that you generated from the
Hmm.
first session, attempt, and like what changed between the first attempt and the 760 attempt? Basically, like what was the change in
Right.
your thought process, your strategy overall?
Right. So after my, the first attempt, what I realized was that while my reading comprehension and critical reasoning were more or less average, sentence correction really needed a lot of more effort and improvement. And I also realized that within sentence correction, it's not just sufficient to understand the rules and then try to apply them, because even despite learning all of these rules, I used to spend a lot of time on every question, like, spending more than 2.5 to 3 minutes. When I started out, I used to spend more than 2.5 to 3 minutes on each SC question. So there was fundamentally my approaches were a little flawed, and I used to spend a lot of time on that. So that was one learning over there. I definitely needed to get the right approach done, and so that I can answer with more confidence as well. So that was more on the verbal side. On the quant, I think that was an eye opener for me, because I had, like I said, had ignored my quant preparation totally, and I think, it was good that I got this eye opener in the first attempt, so that, subsequently I spent a little bit more time and trying to identify my problem areas and fixing all of those things before eventually that, I got the final score that I wanted to get.
Okay. Okay. So how did you approach this differently? Like we understand that there's this
Hmm.
lessons that you took that you need to focus a little more on sentence correction, where your
Right.
thought process about the approach needs to improve. But what was there any preparation strategy difference between the two attempts? Like any
Hmm.
strategic difference between how you thought about the first one and the 761?
Right. So after the first attempt, what I realized, like I said, I realized that, there needs to be a difference in the approach. And so far, my thought process was that if I just understand the basic rules and then do more number of questions, I'll be able to improve on that just by sheer iteration. But I get,
Okay.
after my first attempt, I realized that, that approach is not going to work, because unless you're able to diagnose what's going wrong and, what are the different things that need improvement, unless you're able to diagnose and identify those things and actually work on improving them, giving more number of, attempting more questions, giving more tests, that will just help in reinforcing, where you are right now. It will not help you, get from point A to point B. The result will just reinforce the fact that you are at point A, and, each subsequent test will just give you the same answer. It won't magically improve your score, right? So that was that. So having this realization, I try to self-diagnose at first. to understand, what's going wrong. Why is my sentence correction? Why am I taking so much time on sentence correction, RC as well as CR? And improving time was a constant thing across the three subsections. But specifically in SC, I also needed to improve my accuracy significantly. So I would try to self-diagnose what's going wrong. Why am I not getting the right accuracy? In this process, I happened to come across a lot of YouTube videos. I think that's a platform I really use a lot for my learning. And I
Okay.
happened to come across one of the GMAT Viz videos. I think distinctly remember, it was, the topic was more on how to get from a V30 score to a V40 plus score. What are the major
Okay.
pitfalls that students fall into, and what are the different things that you need to improve on to get to the V40 plus kind of a score. So
Okay.
that's where I realized that, the I got a glimpse of the process that GMAT Viz, the platform, actually follows. And to be honest, that's where I realized that, this is the approach that this platform follows is is quite different from what I've been following so far. Um,
Mhm.
my focus has been more around, understanding the rules and seeing where these rules apply. uh, Rather, what I realized was that, there's a more systematic approach to this, by understanding the meaning, by breaking down sentences into smaller chunks, etc. So the whole approach in I definitely had the whole approach wrong, and through these videos I got a glimpse of, what the right approach should be like. And
Mhm.
I also realized that, while watching these videos, of course, there are a few sample examples that are solved on screen. I felt
Mhm.
much more confident in solving these questions with the approach that the YouTube video was basically highlighting, right? So I
Mhm.
understood that there is a different approach also to the preparation. And
Okay.
having seen a few of these videos, I set up one of the free consultation calls. I think, yeah, I discussed this with you also then over the consultation call, to get more
Mhm.
insights into my own ESR, my own approach. And so that's when I started following. So initially then I signed up on the GMATViz platform specifically for verbal preparation.
Mhm.
And I saw a lot of
Mhm.
improvement in my verbal scores, not just SC, RC, and but also RC and CR. And over a period of time, then, when it came to focusing on my verbal as well, then towards the end, I also took up, uh, you know, uh, I also signed up for the verbal module to,
The quant module, basically.
and yeah, sorry, the quant module, to
Mhm.
enhance my preparation
Okay.
over there.
Okay. Okay. Nice. So let's get to that diagnosis part also and some examples. But one important lesson, like Shreyash basically was here, I guess, 4 months back, attending one of these webinars. So those of you who are worrying about your score improvement, there's a ray of hope. You just need to ensure that you do the right things. You need to diagnose things correctly, as Suresh said, that you need to understand the root cause of the problem and not just take more marks. So
Hmm.
Suresh did not mention this, but he took 4 marks, official marks, before his first attempt when he scored that 640. And just to give you an idea, from that attempt to the 760 attempt, the number of marks that he took in between those were just 5. And trust me, when I speak to people, between for this kind of an improvement, people end up taking about 15, 20 marks, and they don't see a lot of improvement either in the marks. So one very important lesson that you need to understand is identify the root cause. Try to diagnose the root cause, because unless you work on the root cause analysis, you cannot understand where you're struggling and you cannot improve from there. So let's focus on the root cause analysis that Shreyash did, and nothing better than basically the ESR to look into that. So basically, when we had a conversation, Shesh and I had a discussion like back then, what we looked at was, let's approach the different sections differently, because verbal and quant are very different in general. So in verbal, it is very important that we go one module at a time, because it's important for you to develop a certain skill in a module, and then only you should move ahead to the next module. There's no point in mixing things, because what you learn from one module helps you in another. And again, Shesh will highlight more on that part. But in quant, on the other hand, you should be doing one topic at a time, because in quant, there are different methods to be followed for different topics. And you can generally pin down exactly where your weaknesses are. In verbal, on the other hand, if you are already at a level of 30, like in the 30s somewhere, that basically means your conceptual understanding is more or less decent. You need to improve your approach part. So that's where the module wise thought process comes into picture. And let's start with verbal first. So what we started discussing was first the verbal attempt. So this was how the ESR of Shreyash's attempt, first attempt looked like. So it's very clear the observations that we drew from this as Shreyash was studying was that we need to improve the sentence correction score. And what we realized was that sentence correction is a weak area, both conceptually as well as application wise. It's not just like application that we need to work on. There are few concepts, may not be a lot, but a few concepts where we need to improve the like conceptual understanding also. And RC requires improvement in the overall approach and the timing bit. And in fact, when we looked at did in-depth analysis of the ESR, again, this is a lot of data for some of you to analyze, but I'm gonna try my best to make it simple. So if you look at this attempt, you can see that in the first quarter, Shreyas had a 88% accuracy in the first quarter. Because over here, the questions that he was getting was basically of medium difficulty level somewhere. Like it's around medium difficulty that he was getting those questions. But the moment the question difficulty increased to medium high, somewhere over this level, his accuracy started dwindling. It started going like down to 57%. In fact, he got more difficult questions incorrect. This is the red dot compared to the ones that he was getting correct. So what we realized from this was that since he's struggling to get the medium hard questions correct, it re-strengthened the observation that approach is what we need to solidify and not concepts. Because concepts can help you get the medium questions correct. Concepts is what is required for getting the easy and medium questions correct. But the moment you are moving to medium hard or the hard zone, you need to have a very, very solid understanding of the application or the methodology that you are supposed to follow. So that is basically what we drew as the inference. And again, Shreyash can highlight this as well. But the final inferences that we drew from there was that this is a three-step process that we will follow. We'll learn sentence correction from scratch. And very important, guys, a lot of people come to us and say, okay, I'm at a 640, I need a 760. I feel that in my mocks I was doing better. So let me take another attempt in like 15 days or 20 days. But Shreyash did not plan for that. We also don't recommend that. So Shreyash, your thoughts on this? Why did you not think about another 10, 15 days for another attempt when you were getting 700 on the mocks?
Right. So it was very tempting to actually go ahead and give another mock and give another attempt very early. I think it took a lot of effort for me also to stop myself from doing that. And I thought that I didn't want to get into the whole spiral of giving tests multiple times again and again, which a lot of students do fall into that trap, right? Of giving the exam multiple times. So I thought that it's best to spend more time in solidifying your concepts, understanding things, and getting a lot of clarity in how to approach the problems, and actually making fundamental level improvements before jumping in and giving more mocks or actually going ahead and attempting your final exam as well. So I think all in all, if you're at a if let's say if you're at a 680s to 700 kind of a level, either on the mocks or on the final GMAT score, I think you have the right ingredients. You have the right intellect. That baseline is clear. It's just that you need to refine your approach and approach the exam in a certain manner to actually extract the most amount of the extract the most out of your attempt. So I then with that kind of a thought process, I thought about taking more time out and just getting the approach and thought process right before making the next attempt. And I think that
And
really
like
pays off a lot.
and obviously your job was also very demanding. If I understand correctly,
Yeah.
your job required you to work around 12 hours on an average, like on a
Yes.
daily basis. So with that thing in place, like it would have been even more difficult to kind of give more time for your studies. But this is something which is a very important lesson for all of you who are attending this. Please make sure that you're not rushing through it, because when you rush through a certain attempt, you might think that okay, you're looking at a short-term picture, you might get done with the test in 15-20 days, but in more cases than not, if you have a demanding job, it will actually be counterproductive, because you will put more pressure on you to complete the stuff in like X number of days. Your job doesn't allow you to focus on it as much, so whatever you study in those days will basically not be very effective either, and in the end what happens is that you end up spending even more time for your preparation in general. So that's a very, very important lesson that we need to take. And as Shreyash mentioned, Shreyash also planned, like we discussed this with Shreyash in the beginning itself, that we are gonna start sentence correction from scratch. No stones left unturned over there. We'll focus on concepts and application, and in RC and CR, we'll focus on improving the timing. Basically, that's where we go on the application part. And finally, we will talk about the practicing of verbal questions. That's something how we plan to actually go about doing it, because there's no point of just focusing on the last thing, which is just taking more questions and memorizing things. So the main understanding you need to generate, one main learning that you need to generate from Shreyash's journey was that a solid groundwork is needed. Just practicing and taking mocks is not gonna help. Okay, so that is one important piece of strategic advice that we decided, that this is how we are gonna place it: SC, then RC and CR together, and then we will focus on the verbal questions, and we are gonna do a good job at SC. One of the biggest reason for that was also that if you do SC pretty well, you see an automatic improvement in CR and RC from the thought process of reading it slow that you develop. So without any further ado, let's get to the execution stage, and let's hear from Shreyash that how did he go about his sentence correction approach? Like how did you approach your sentence correction in the second phase of your learning? Let's call the second phase as when you saw that improvement in your score. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So for sentence correction, again, rather than thinking about what kind of which rule is applicable in a particular question, the approach now became more around understanding what the sentence means, right? Breaking down the sentence into smaller chunks and understanding the meaning of each part of the sentence, right? And then coherently understanding what the sentence as a whole mean. So that, once you have that kind of an approach solidified, uh, after a point what happens, these mistakes start popping out to you, uh, just as you read the question. On a single pass you will be able to identify the two or three mistakes that are going wrong in the particular question. So I think having a strong foundation helped me a lot in this, because once you have that in place, as I said, the mistakes in that particular question, just it's much more easier for you to identify them. And as a result, this not only increases your accuracy, but it also improves it also gives you a lot of confidence while you're marking a particular answer, because you know exactly why a particular answer is wrong versus the next option. So that helped me a lot in the when I gave my subsequent attempts, having the right approach in place.
So how did you develop this approach? Like you talked about that you should basically be stopping when you read the sentence, understand the
Mhm.
sentence, each part of it well, and like
Right.
if you do that in the first pass itself, you should be able to identify the errors. But how did you go about learning this approach that you're talking about?
Right,
What
right.
was the method that you followed for learning?
Hmm. So, I for again for I used the GMAT platform quite extensively for this. As part of the sentence correction module, it's further broken down into various sub modules around specific concepts, right? Whether it's, let's say, modifiers, or whether let's say it's a subject verb agreement, pronouns, etc. So it's broken down into various sub segments, and then actually, before even you get into these each specific topics, you learn essentially uh, the right approach of reading the sentence, right? How do you break it down? How do you connect one part of the sentence to the next? So to solidify this concept, I think the GMAT platform really helped me a lot. The learning modules and videos, those were really helpful in getting that getting that down, because in contrast to, let's say, the popular books that a lot of us might have used already or are probably using right now as well, do the content that they have, that's totally right, because I mean, the rules, etc., all of them are very relevant. But then the gap is between learning those rules and actually implementing them in the environment of the exam. So that's what really helped me while going through the that's a skill set actually that I developed while going through these modules specifically.
Okay, okay. So you first started basically in the GMAT module, you started focusing on learning the meaning driven approach, and then you went about individual topics where you started learning the like how to apply that approach in the individual topics. And that is basically what changed your thought process. Great. So, like quickly summarizing what Shreyash did in the SC part. So he first learned the basics from meaning perspective, but just focusing on this part, like why was it important for you to start using the meaning based approach from the very beginning? Why not like learn all the rules and then I'm playing devil's advocate here, just cross
Mhm.
questioning you, but why did you think it was important to like focus on the meaning from the day one get go? You said that was the first thing which came, and not do it other way
Mhm.
around, that you learn the rules first and then think about the meaning. Why?
Right, right. I think, with the other way around, this approach, what, because once you have the rules in place, right? The way most of, most of our minds are structured is that once you have a set of rules in your mind already, you tend to start looking for those rules very actively, and then a large part of your focus is then, diverted towards finding, like, finding where the rule fits. What are the mistakes in this, what are the different kind of mistakes that are is there in a particular sentence with respect to the rules, whether or not
Mhm.
the sentence in question uh, is an exception to the rule or not. So you tend to go down that path, and that becomes really, really time consuming, and also consumes a lot of your mental bandwidth. And what I also realized over a period of time, those you don't need to remember all of these rules as well. If you have the right approach in mind, like, if, like, for example, if you understand the meaning of the sentence, and you're approaching these questions in a logical manner, I think it's not even necessary for you to remember, or, so to say, learn these rules by rote, which a lot of
That's
times,
very
we fall into this trap very often as well. Even I'll admit that even in my first attempt, uh, my thought process was also around understanding the rules, understanding the exceptions to the rules, and learning all of them by heart, and then trying to see where these things fit, right?
fit in.
By
True.
the,
No, this is a
just
very,
one
very important lesson. Very important lesson. In fact, I like the line when you said that there comes a point when you think that you don't even need to memorize those rules, right? You don't need to remember those rules either. It's like
Mhm.
logic flowing all over the all over the sentence. Like you look at the sentence and kind of ask yourself at every point, is it logically fine? Is this logically sound? If it is, I can move forward. It becomes
Correct.
that easy for you to remember. So very
Right.
valid point, and I can actually
Yeah.
vouch for it because this is the same thing which I felt like I was a struggler
Mhm.
in SC. Like you at least got a 57 percentile in your first attempt. My first attempt was a 13 percentile in sentence correction. Not a actual GMAT, but yeah, the first mock that I took after like a significant amount of preparation. So that one thing which changed was the thought process of meaning. So really, really important lessons. Those of you who are actually struggling with sentence correction, that's something we should definitely do. And then focusing on practicing questions is important. As Shreyas mentioned, that you should go to individual questions after that on certain subject verb modifiers and those topics, where you focus on applying that methodology and improving the typing. And this will basically build the confidence and turn your strengths into weaknesses. That is something which is very important overall. So anything you would like to add to this, Shreyash, from our side?
Yeah, I think, when you lay down these 3 points, I think it sums up the entire approach very well. I think just to solidify that, you can draw an analogy with, let's say, building a house, right? It's very important to have the foundations very strong and laid down in the right way, so that you can build the rest of the house uh, properly. And once you have the structure of the house ready, then, just optimizing on the start on, what kind of paint to apply, what kind of fixtures to apply. And let's say, in the drawing a parallel with the exam, I think that the last piece of things will, the last few things that you need to fine tune are these, exam day strategy, your time management, and all of these things. So it's very important that we approach, this in a structured manner, like it's visible on the slide as well. So
No,
that helps
definitely.
you, that really helps, bring out the best out of your capabilities in the exam.
So I have a relevant question on this point. Shubham is there in the chat. He said, "How many hours were you able to study with your work? My work is similarly demanding, and this is impacting my prep. So how did you go about doing that, Shreyash?"
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very relevant question. I'm sure a lot of other people also struggle with this. Uh, what figured out over a period of time, what works best for me is that I used to carve out time in the morning before getting into the work. Let's say you start work at, let's say, 10 a.m. or let's say even 9:30 a.m. So and even in this time, actually, work from home is a very, it's a blessing in disguise, rather, even for me, because the time that I used to spend in commuting, I got the opportunity to channelize that into my exam preparation. So I used to spend 1.5 to 1.5 hours early in the morning to study for my exam, study for the GMAT, and then get into the rest of the work. And the reason why I took up this approach is also, after I did a few iterations, I tried to figure out what works best. I soon realized that whenever I start studying later in the evening after my work is done, there are two issues with that. One is that, for me at least, I did not have a very strong visibility on when I'm going to get free at the end of the day. Is it going to be 9 p.m.? Is it going to be 8 p.m., 7 p.m.? It was it was not, there wasn't a fixed time for me. And the second thing was, very often after the end of the day, I was mentally very exhausted, and spending time on solving questions or learning new concepts or learning new approaches would often prove to be very unproductive. So over a period of time, what I realized best was that it's best to spend time in the morning before, when your mind is fresh, before you haven't got into the chaos of your work. That's the best time to spend studying for the GMAT. And maybe if you can carve out some time towards the end of the day, maybe you could probably spend that time on, let's say, reviewing questions or revising or stuff like that, which actually isn't that intellectually demanding. So I think that's what worked well for me, trying to trying to carve out time at the beginning and at the end of the day, and also figuring out what kind of preparation activities to do when in these two time periods.
That is also very important. So those are two aspects to it. One is making sure that there are certain slots which you kind of always carve out for yourself. Someone was asking where does Shares work. So I'm not sure if he's comfortable saying it, but he works in a startup, one of the biggest unicorns in the country. So his job is definitely very demanding because of that. So it's very important that you carve out your morning slots, and that's one of the recommendations that I give to students. In my case, for example, if you are like me, then probably that's going to be an issue. I'm a late riser. I'm an out night owl. I perform best at night. So if that is the case, probably then you are in a fix because you don't know when your work is going to end. And obviously, after that much work, you kind of feel exhausted. So in that case, just adding one point from my side that you can probably try studying an hour if possible. I do not recommend cramming after like your work hours, because if you're not feeling focused, you're not gonna do justice to the time that you're gonna spend. So it's better in that case, in my opinion, to study on the weekends. Even if it is little, you study on the weekends and do a little bit if possible on the weekdays. That's my recommendation for people who are night owls like me. People who can rise early, study early, definitely follow the Shreyash's advice. Carving out time slot in the morning is definitely very, very helpful. And after that, it is very important that you should have crystal clear clarity about what you should do on a specific day. Because again, Shreyash, like how important do you feel is that
Yeah.
also? Like,
Yeah, I think that's very important. I've missed highlighting that. So, what's really important is, a lot of times what we tend to focus on is, how many hours of study is required. But it's not the number of hours of study that will actually get you through. It's actually setting milestones and, understanding, it's basically quality over quantity, right? So personally, when I was doing my preparation, I used to set time milestones for myself. Now, depending on your level, your working style, those milestones can be daily milestones or it can be weekly milestones, whatever works for you. But rather than focusing more on the number of hours that you need to study, having milestones in mind here, that let's say by the end of this week, this is I want to let's say finish this particular concept, and let's say practice 25 questions on this concept to actually solidify my learning. So this is what I want to achieve, let's say, over a period of the next 5 days. So having those kind of milestones in place will help actually keep you accountable as well. That are you on track, are you not on track, versus having a target of number of hours of study. Because number of hours of studies, we all know that it's a it's not very often that it's very common that we get distracted from
Hmm.
studying, and the efficacy of your study actually is questionable, right? After a point. So it's best to set milestones rather than number of hours.
And just to give you an idea, like how shares used to set the milestones. One of an example, like I'm just showing you a sample study plan that basically shares would have created on the GMAT platform. And any of you who is interested in creating this, you can always use the free trial account to create this for yourself and see basically how it works. The platform automatically helps you set up a proper study plan for every single week. Tasks are outlined for you, which videos you need to watch, which quizzes you need to take, at which point of time. And it's an AI-driven platform. So no two students end up getting the same kind of plan. Two students will have very different plans based on what you need to work on. And it's an adaptive plan. So you can just click on the start button and actually plan things right on the go using the platform, which Shreyash also used to do. And I remember, like, I used to work as a mentor with Shreyash. So there are like mentors were assigned, different mentors were assigned when you take the GMAT platform. And we used to have this calls every 15 days, 10, 15 days or so, where we used to set up milestones and we used to connect about how much he has achieved. And to be very honest with you guys, for the first 2 months, Shreyash was not able to achieve most of his milestones. Like, in fact, I do remember some few of our discussions where I literally had to tell Shreyash, did you complete the last homework which I gave you? And he said that my work pressure was too hectic and I was not able to do that. So that can happen with you. It's okay to miss the milestones, but if you do not have the milestones, I feel that you will never be able to actually get to that target score. So have that milestones, make sure that you're making yourself accountable for it. If you miss it once or twice, it's okay, but that will at least make you realize that these are the things that you're missing and these are the things that you need to do, which is something I feel very, very critical for your score improvement altogether. Yeah. And please feel free to add anything which I missed shares over here. So
No, I think that was completely spot on, because I remember that the milestone that I used to have, that, let's say on Saturday morning, let's say on a Saturday morning, I used to decide here, today I want to complete, let's say, this particular topic, this particular module completely. So I used to, and now when I have that milestone in place, it doesn't matter how many hours I spend. It's, whatever it takes, you need to, I need to commit to completing this particular module in the time frame that I decided, right? So it's more result oriented, and that, help me. And once you put these milestones in place, actually you can see the progress yourself, and that kind of becomes of a self fulfilling cycle as well, because you get more motivated once you see that you're, ticking off milestones as you go. You tend to become more motivated. You get into a momentum, and that just helps your cause even more.
yeah, definitely. That makes you inch towards your target score. And in fact, there was this one person who was asking how much time did you prepare? How was the gap between the attempts? So again, Shreyash had, I guess, 4 months about approximately between
Hmm.
the two attempts, out of which like the first 2 months he was not able to give in a lot of time. Those were the months when we used to have those discussions and there were some deadlines we were missing. But yeah, thankfully, when round one came close, Shreyash devised a plan where again, Shares did not highlight this. I'm just filling the spaces
Yeah.
here. So what Shares decided was that in like 1 month, I'm gonna cover all my basics, like as I said, sentence correction, and we are gonna talk about RC also now. But for SC, CR, RC, and even in the quant section, like 1 month, we are gonna cover all the basics alongside job as much as possible. And then last 1 month, we are gonna plan for the fine tuning and the like final stretch of the GMAT, where I think we came to a point in that 1 month, first month itself, where we felt that because of the work pressure, he was not able to study a lot. So he tried pulling in more hours on the weekend, and then he took a little bit of a sabbatical also from work. I guess about 14 days of
Yeah.
sabbatical
I
time
took.
studies is what he did. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I went towards the end. I had to take some time off from work as well. So, if it comes to that, I think you should also try to optimize on that front as well. Especially if you're on a hectic job, try to cover as much as you can while studying, while working as well. But at least in the towards the end, when you're closer to the exam, try to see if you can negotiate and try to take some time off from work to focus more on your preparation in the final stretch. That will just help you get into the zone and not be bothered about pressure from work when you're about to just give your exam.
And very important that you are done with your basic stuff well, because that final sprint will only make sense when you are actually done the groundwork properly. If your groundwork is shaky, then that final sprint is also not going to help you. So please make sure that your groundwork is done well. In fact, I remember Shreyash discussing with me very clearly that, Piyush, is it the right time to take the sabbatical? And we discussed that how we are going to take that, and whether we are at the right stage or not. So please make sure that you are very clear about this. If possible, speak to a mentor. If you work with GMAT, you get mentors, you can speak to them. But do make sure that you are taking the call at the right part. Okay, so I want to ask one more question, which is there from Nana Muffin, which is about sentence correction. Since we were at sentence correction, let's take this up very quickly. I know we need to move forward to the other parts, but he says, did you struggle with timing in SC after applying the meaning based approach? How did you reduce the time from 2 to 3 minutes to 1.5 minutes basically?
Hmm, hmm, hmm. So yeah, I think for that on the how that worked out for me was that when I had my basics right, when I got the right meaning based approach, what I noticed was that the improvement in accuracy and the improvement in my time, both of them went hand in hand. The reason for actually there's a reason behind that as well, because the reason why our let's say the accuracy is poor is because you're not very confident between we're not very the only reason why your accuracy will not be good is because I will either get stuck, you will probably get stuck between various options and spend more time in trying to understand which option to actually eliminate, right, out of the last two or three options. So that was a big reason why my accuracy took a hit in the initial exam, in the initial attempt, as well as me spending more than necessary time on solving a particular question. So once you follow the meaning based approach, what I realized was that you're not only more confident in eliminating the wrong answers, you can also do that faster. So both of these improvements, at least for me, and I'm sure like if you follow the right approach, will it will happen for you as well, that both of these improvements go hand in hand,
Very valid
because
point,
both of
because
them
I think rereading is the biggest culprit. Rereading is the biggest culprit, which leads you to more taking more time to solve questions. And if you're doing the reading properly, as Shreyas mentioned, it's about investing in building the foundation right. If you invest in that, if you invest in reading the sentence properly, you save time on eliminating the answer choices. So that's basically the most important thing that you need to focus. Uh, so yes, let's move on to the next areas also. So how did you go about CR and RC? Like, what was the thought process for
Hmm,
reading comprehension in CR for you? What changed in
yeah,
the second attempt for that?
right. So for RC and CR, I think my accuracy when I looked at the ESR, my accuracy was and I think was near about average. I think I was decently happy with how my accuracy was for CR and RC. But then a major pain point was actually spending too much time on these questions. So the
Mhm.
time management was a key problem area for RC and CR questions that I needed to solve. And again, in retrospect, I can say that the reason why I spent more time on, let's say, an RC question is because once I would read through the entire passage, there will only be certain, you know, not so you also need to retain the information that you're reading and the passage as you go through, right? So once you've read through the passage and then you move on to the questions, if you are in a position where you need to refer to the passage again and again, of course, with an exception of let's say the question types which are looking for specific details from the passage. But if you're, let's say, if the passage is also, let's say, talking about uh, the overall message that the author the overall uh, a message that the author wants to get through, for example, right? For those kind of questions also, I used to refer back to the passage again and again while solving the question. So again, while I did get a decent accuracy while going back and forth, but then it cost me a lot of my time, and ultimately also a huge contributor to not getting the desired score I wanted. So over here, I think RC, that's what needed to improve a lot. And for RC again, took the I learned the same approach that uh, the GMAT based platform teaches. essentially, breaking down, breaking down the whole passage into smaller chunks, right into passages and specific sentences also, and trying to follow the meaning of the sentences as you read through it, right? So that helped me a lot in getting the right approach down. And I think at a later point in time, once I was done with solidifying my approach, I was at a stage where after reading through the passage once, I not only had a fair sense of what message does each passage convey, but then the when you put together the messages and the main points of all the three or four passages, what does the passage as a whole want to convey? What is the takeaway from the passage? So I had a very strong sense of that as well. Navigating through the passage and understanding what is the meaning that's being conveyed, and that helped me answer, let's say, the questions in a very short amount of time. Like I specifically remember towards the end, once I was done with the reading part of the once I was done with reading the passage, a lot of times you should take hardly 30 to 50 seconds while answering the question,
Each
because
question.
each question, because once you know the meaning of the whole passage, the answers just pop up to you directly, and it's very easier, and you feel much more confident in eliminating the wrong answers when you understand the passage that much well.
Very valid point. Very valid point, Shreyash. In fact, this is one very important lesson which I tell students always, that when you are actually going through the passage, like RC passage, you should not be focusing on just using brute force. Basically, Shreyash was someone who was at a 80 percentile already in RC. It was like in the first attempt itself. But even for him, he felt that if he uses the right reading approach, right reading strategies, that helped him improve the retention and save the time that he was taking to solve questions, reduce the back and forth. And not just that, it helped him improve the timing and attain a consistency overall as well. So the main thing over here, if you want to get a 760, and in fact I'm going to like, there's a question about the ESR also. I'm going to show the ESRs of relevant portions, phenomenon, don't worry. But in the ESRs also I'll show you that it is about that consistency. Why he scored a 42 and the quant 50 was because he had consistent accuracy in the medium and medium hard questions also. So that is something which is very important for you to understand. You can get to a certain level by actually applying brute force, but if you want to get the harder questions right consistently, the main thing that you need to focus on is reading things properly. Okay, so one relevant question, Shreyash, over here from Somya: will reading articles from Economist or any such article help in RC?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I think I think I can give my own example. Is that uh, when I gave my first attempt, I think in terms of my own reading speed, I think I was decently well, because of all the reading that I did. Let's say, uh, in back in school, college, etc. Right. So because of that, I think my baseline reading speed was fine, and there was just a fine tuning that was required. So at that point, I realized that reading more is not the right answer. Reading correctly is the right answer. So I spent more of my time and energy into reading the passage in the right manner through the platform. But then uh, I feel that if reading the Economist or any such other passage will probably help you if, let's say, your own baseline reading speed is somewhat below average, and if you feel that that needs significant improvement, then I feel that reading more articles and such will also give you a boost. But if you assess yourself as having a decent reading speed, I would recommend spending more time on getting the approach and understanding how to read the passage well, rather than actually just spending more time on reading different passages again and again.
Okay. We have another question from Bedior. Not sure if you will be able to answer this, but did you apply the fire approach on RC? Is what he is asking.
uh, yeah, I think I'm not aware of the fire approach, so
Okay.
clearly I don't think I
Yeah, it's a little
applied.
bit different. I'm also not completely aware of this, but this is one approach which is there. I guess it is about reading things faster, like skimming through the passages and coming back to the passages. I might be wrong, as I said, I'm not 100% aware of it. But what Shreyash followed was the GMAT Viz involved and evolved reading approach, which asks you to go through the passage in entirety. And if you want to basically check out that, you can check out on the GMAT Viz platform. I guess that will help you. So moving on to the next thing, basically the ESR. So basically all these things applied. Shesh was definitely able to score really, really well on RC and SC. 96 percentile, to be honest, like that's RC in RC 96 is the highest that one can get. So he actually got a RC 51, which is the highest score. In SC also, was very close to achieving the highest score in SC also. And I was saying in the beginning of the session, like today, that Shesh was saying he felt lucky. I felt the other way around. He was doing pretty well on CR. In fact, I remember like the couple of mocks that you took before your final attempt. In both those mocks, your CR was at I guess 70 to 80 percentile in both of them. Like and these were like GMAT Viz mocks, which are slightly more difficult when it comes to overall percentile scores. So seeing that 42 was, I felt bad looking at it. I felt that probably he could have ended up with a purple 44 if he had a better CR score. But yeah, having said that, few things like sometimes it might happen that one or two questions you can get wrong. But if you are prepared properly, this is the question that you get because of that preparation. That even on a bad day, you end up doing that well on the in the verbal section. Yeah.
Right.
So this is basically the improvement. Yeah. Anything you would like to add here, Shesh?
Yeah, I think just the fact is that I think the low score in CR. I think that's something even I'm not sure what happened on the day of the exam, and I can see why you say that my attempt. I was probably unlucky when it comes to my score, but uh, yeah, I think the
We have the
96
quant thing
percentile
lined
also
up
was.
also.
Hmm,
No, that is true. 96 definitely helped a lot because that's the whole point. Like if you, I always say to tell students who are looking at a 760 that see for a score like a 760 or anything above that, it is very important for you to be perfect in all the areas because it's also about the performance on that day. Like one or two questions here and there can actually drop your scores significantly. So if you are really looking at that, one very important lesson is you cannot compromise on any of the three sections. Like at least you cannot plan to compromise on them. Even if it happens on the day of the test, you can still be like Shreyash and get a 42. But yeah, you should not plan to compromise on any of these. So yeah, so if in any case you guys are looking at personalized advice for your prep, just a small discussion around it. Basically, when you come to us or work with GMAT, we look at multiple factors, including how much time is available with you, how much target score is basically you are aiming for, what are the resources you have utilized, what are the strengths and weaknesses that you have, and what are your methods of learning and your learning style. So all those things we take into account and we generally help you understand what is the right strategy that you should follow. Just like in case of Shreyash, it was really, really helpful because that helped him get a sense of how you should prepare for things well. So please, if you want to connect with me or my team of experts, you can always schedule this call. We will be happy to hear about you, know about you, and help you prepare a strategic plan of action for you. So let's move on to the quant part with that. So how did they go about quant? And again, this is something which
yeah,
is very critical that Shreyas mentioned that he had a for like 42 on the test, but he was not expecting to score this low. He was generally getting a
correct.
slightly better score on the GMAT official marks. So what were your observations from the official marks? Like what was the difference that you see between the official
Yeah,
marks and the actual test? Was there any
yeah.
difference?
So what happened for me is that when I was giving the official mocks, I used to get consistently a Q50, sorry, yeah, a Quant 50 or a Quant 51 on those tests. But on the exam day, I got a 42, and in subsequent attempts also, before the final attempt of 760, I gave two more attempts in between. So I was getting a score of, on the main exam, I used to get a score of around 49 instead of a 50. So uh, what one observation over here is that definitely, at least in my observation, was that the GMAT official GMAT quiz, the quant section is slightly easier than what you can expect on the day of the exam. So the result, if you're getting let's say a 50 or a 51 on the official uh, test, I would take that with a pinch of salt and also try to attempt even harder questions to ensure that you are still on track and you will get a good score on the day of the exam as well. Because one mistake that I made was that I banked on that too much, and then that made me a little complacent with respect to my quant preparation in the initial stages. And because of that, I did not spend a lot of time preparing for quant, and that I think kind of results in my poor score as well in the initial
Yeah, so it's
attempts.
very important that you, as I said, for verbal also, you cannot take anything for granted. You should not take quant for granted as well. Even if you're an engineer, even if you're really good in quant, you should not take it for granted, because if that is your strength, you definitely need to improvise on that strength. And in fact, just to give you an idea, like how we worked with Shreyash, because he was decently well in quant in the other marks and the other tests that he was taking. So we realized that there is no point of going through everything, and we need to identify the baseline performance in each area. So what we recommended was that we will take up 30 question quizzes in each area of NP, algebra, word problems, and geometry, so that we have a baseline understanding of what are the conceptual gaps and what are the application related gaps. So where he's looking at improving the understanding of concepts and where he needs to improve his method primarily. So we categorize them into two buckets, topics highlighted in red, and this is automatically done by the GMAT West portal, by the way. So if you take this test on GMAT West, it automatically highlights the topics in red and blue. So this is basically just a sample baseline score that you can see. You can see some areas in red, for example, interest is in red, and there are certain areas which are in blue also. So in the red ones, that is where you need to work on your concepts, and the blue ones you need to work on your application or the process skills. And what we recommended Shreyash for the red topics was that you work on the conceptual gaps through video lessons first on those areas, then work on the application gaps through the concept boosters, and finally work on the practice questions. So it's a thorough work that you have to do on all these areas, and that's what we call as precision targeting, that you focus on doing exactly what your weaknesses are. Similarly for the blue one, for example, linear equations example, you need to first work on the application gaps through concept boosters and practice, then practice questions and improve your timing. So this is something which is very, very critical, and this will help you like improvise your scores really well. In fact, as I said, I felt that Shesh was a little unlucky also. So you can see that the total number of mistakes that he made in quant was basically two. So one mistake in the third and one mistake in the last quarter. So just two mistakes and you still see a quant 50. So he was almost borderline 51, in my opinion, very, very close to 51. Just one, like if I could have swapped the DS one that he got incorrect with the PS one, I'm pretty confident that he would have gotten a 51 with the same number of mistakes also. But yeah, that's how things are. So he ended up with that kind of a score. And the main thing you need to understand here is that you need to focus on taking quant seriously as well. Even if it is your strength, you should not ignore it and learn better methods. So Shreyash, anything you would like to add in this part? I know like
Mhm.
I've taken people through what you followed, but anything that you want to add here?
Yeah, I think what I would like to add over here is that, like Piyush mentioned, right? You don't just definitely do not ignore one half of the exam altogether. I think that will be very detrimental. And apart from that, the approach that you saw on the previous slide as well, right? Trying to identify which topics are weak and if there are better approaches to to those topics as well. That really helps. So I'll give you my own example. Uh, so for me, set theory, for example, was one of the I think red topics. So sorry, yeah, set theory was I think one of the red topics. So over there, I had my own approach to solving these set theory kind of questions. But then what would happen is, in questions where in more complex and difficult questions that you tend to get if you're attempting to get a Q50 or a 51. So in those kind of questions, I usually took more time to solve them. And in addition to that, as the questions got more complex, the accuracy also started reducing a bit because of the more convoluted approach that I used to take to solving these questions. And uh, you know through the course of my preparation, I also found, through the platform and through the video lessons that I saw on the platform, I could identify more cleaner and better approaches uh, to specifically set theory kind of questions. So that really helped me a lot. and understanding if there are more efficient ways to solve the same question. That not only helps you in reducing the time you spent on the questions, but also a cleaner approach will ensure that when the question becomes too complex, your thought process also, so you are also able to keep up with the thought, with the question, and get it right as well.
Not true. That consistency, that accuracy, that confidence is very important, not just timing part. But good that you have talked about the timing. So I'm gonna move to the timing strategy now. So was there any change in the pacing strategy or the timing strategy that you followed between the two attempts? Was there any change at
Mhm.
all?
Yes, yes. I think for me there was definitely a huge change because initially in my first attempt, I did not have a very nuanced timing strategy in place. I just broadly had in mind कि ठीक है यार, I have so much time and I have so many questions. If you just divide the two, you get a ballpark of how many minutes you can afford to spend on a particular question. Right? That was it. Nothing more nuanced than that. But you know, over my as I got to my final attempt, uh, you know, I developed through I think there was a more nuanced the timing strategy that I used in the exam. And for example, and both of these timing strategies, I think, should ideally be different for your quant as well as verbal section. For quant, what worked best for me, I think, was that you know, f- uh, spending the first 25 questions or so, and trying to ensure that you get the best accuracy in the first 25 questions or so, while also optimizing for the amount of time that you spend. And once you reach the, let's say, the last 8-10 questions, at that point in time, that's when you should start optimizing and change your strategy altogether. That's what worked for me, because I think because of how the algorithm also works, uh, it's very important to get your first 20-25 questions accurate, because that helps you boost your score as well. So the compromises that I made in terms of my time were towards the last 8 to 10 questions. And even with that, so in my first approach, what I used to do was I used to rush. I used to try to attempt all of the questions that I can, and then towards the end, I used to be left with, let's say, 4, 5, or 6 questions that I had to take a blind guess on, because of the scarcity of time. But towards the final attempt, I modified my approach in a manner where, in the last 8 questions, rather than out of the last 8 to 10 questions, rather than spending less time on the final 3, 4 questions, I tried to optimize my timing over the course of the last 8, 10 questions. What I mean by that is that, rather than being forced to spend less time on, let's say, the last 3 questions, you should be in the position to choose which 3, 4 questions you want to spend less time out of the final 10 questions. What that will actually help you with is that, of course, all of us have our own strengths and weaknesses as well, right? So based on your own strengths, based on the type of question that you encounter, you have the liberty of actually choosing which questions you want to spend less time on, rather than being forced to spend less time on the final 3 questions. So that is one thing that really helped me in my verbal timing strategy.
A very important lesson. In fact, when I was even looking at your ESR, the first attempt that we discussed, this basically, if you look at, this is the first attempt ESR, by the way, like in which Shreyash scored a 640. And there was one question. Obviously, this attempt was offline attempt, because otherwise, if it's an online attempt, we don't get the ESR of it. So this is the offline attempt that Shreyash took. So in this attempt, if you see the third quarter, Shreyash tried a little to rush, basically. If you look at the timing over here, to basically kind of complete the test in a way to be able to get some time for the later half also. Again, I do not say that like it was a wrong move over here. In this case, at the skill, in my opinion, that he was at that point of time, it was a decent move, because he, even after spending a decent amount of time on the questions that he got incorrect, he was not able to get them right. So it was a application issue here. But if you are prepared properly, when you have prepared properly, I would always recommend people to do well on the let's say the third quarter also. So if you look at the 760 attempt over here, the timing for the first and the second quarter remains similar, but what changes significantly is the time in the third quarter. Very important lesson over here is that you should not try and rush through the third quarter. As Shreyash was saying, that first 25 to 27 questions matter a lot. And you look at the trajectory over here, you look at the accuracy in the first three quarters and the accuracy in the last quarter. The last quarter performance is way poorer compared to the first attempt that he had. But because of his accuracy in the first three quarters, what happened was the algorithm kept on increasing the difficulty level of the questions significantly at each attempt, at each place. And what happened because of this was he obviously had less time towards the end. But as Shreyas said, he focused only giving 10-20 seconds on the questions that he did not want to attempt. Basically, he was choosy among the questions and he spent more time on the questions that he wanted to attempt and get a decent accuracy over there. So in the end, basically, in summarizing the learnings, focus on using the same approach in the test. Do not cut down on the approach basically because you're short on time, and get as high accuracy as possible in the first 27 questions and be choosy about the last 7 to 8 if needed. And please remember one more thing: correcting the methodology is the key. No test taking strategy can actually work for you. If you do not correct the methodology at all, like spending additional time is alone not going to work for you. Many times I say this to people in my webinar, Shreyash, and people think that okay, first 27 questions I have to focus on. I will just give more time to it and I'll get them right. But that's not how things basically work on the GMAT. So it's very important that you understand this part, that first Shreyas worked on the improvement of the methodology, and then only he focused on the timing part through his mocks that he took. Okay, so I think that is more or less what we wanted to cover. So I'm opening it up for the open-ended Q&A now. In case you have any questions, any things that you want to ask Shreyas, we can definitely take up your questions now. So I'm going to take up some questions relevant over here. So Shubhaditya says, do you think we need to go for OG advanced in quants?
The OG advanced, I personally did not refer the OG advanced questions. I mostly refer to the OG as well as the GMAT based platform. So I think what's more important is actually, rather than, again, as I said, rather than doing more hard questions, try to narrow down your problem areas, because I'm sure there'll be certain topics where you're super strong at, and over there you need not spend a lot of your time and effort in doing advanced level questions. Rather, what you could spend time on doing is, on the topics which you are weak, or let's say you tend to take a lot of time, more on the type of questions where you tend to take more amount of time, or let's say you have a poorer accuracy. Try to identify if there are simpler ways to attempt those questions, rather than pushing yourself to or do more advanced level questions. I think, in my opinion and in my experience, that would help you much more than trying to just having, uh, as a blanket, just trying to attempt more hard questions.
A very
Because
valid point. In
that's
fact,
exactly the trap that I fell into in my initial preparations as well.
that's a very common trap. That's a very common trap. People think that I just need to do more harder questions without realizing that they have to work on their pain points. In fact, Shreyash was like in the beginning itself, he said the most important thing is to identify the root cause where you're going wrong, the diagnosis basically. So please do that correctly, and that should definitely help you. So one more question from Banana Muffin, and Jayant also has a similar question. Like, what do you do in the last week, basically, before the
Hmm.
test?
Yeah, that's interesting actually. In the last week, what I would recommend is, because I think throughout your preparation, you would have learned the concepts, you would have learned the approach, etc. That more or less is, similar to like riding a bicycle. Once you've learned it, it's tough that for you to, not apply those approaches again. So just make sure that in the last week that the approach is one solidified in your mind. That becomes your second nature in terms of attempting your questions. That should be one thing. The second thing that you should focus on is actually, just fine tuning your strategy, trying to think of way what's your timing strategy going to be like we discussed for the verbal section, right? How much time are you willing, what's your thought process going to be like when you're attempting the last 10 questions versus, let's say, attempting the first 25 questions. So things like that, that's just what you should probably be thinking on in the last week. And in the 1 or 2 days leading up to the final exam, what worked best for me is actually just not overworking myself. in terms of solving more questions, doing more practice. But at least for my own temperament, what worked best was just solving 10-15 questions daily, so that I don't feel that I'm out of touch. That psychologically gave me the confidence that I'm still in touch with the content that I'm doing, but at the same time I'm not overworking myself. So I think
That's very
last few
important.
days,
And
that's
Shreyash had an entire day to him in the end. So even then he was just solving 10, 15 questions. Very, very important lesson, guys. Do not overwhelm yourself. I kind of tell this to many people, but they do not agree. They're like, okay, I'm gonna study till the last day itself. Like I don't see a point. Like if you have not changed something in like 2 months or 3 months of your preparation, how can you expect it to be changed in one day? And that one day additional overwhelming actually puts a lot of pressure on you on the day of the test, which you don't want to have. You want your mind to be very free, because GMAT is not a test of memory. You cannot mug up things and like spill over on the day of the test. You have to analyze and do your best and be in the best state of mind. So very, very important lesson, like for the last few days, definitely.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. One more question I'm gonna take some Chinmay. She says, "What should someone going for a second attempt do if they have exhausted all the official mocks?" I guess you are at a similar
Mhm.
stage, like you had just two mocks
Yes.
left after the first attempt. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I did was actually, even though I exhausted all of these box, uh, the official in the official mock you have an option to reset your score, so that each mock you can give it twice. I took a chance at that. Of course, when you're all out of official mocks, resetting that will give you another attempt of the same mocks. But the caveat here being that, of course, there will be 2-3 questions or probably even more, which will be familiar to you, and which you will instantly recognize that this is one question that you've already solved, or this is one passage that you've already read in the past. So that might improve your score a little bit, but then of course you will have a lot more new questions to also solve. It will also give you an opportunity to try your timing strategy and solidify that as well. So if you are in the place in a place where you're just trying to narrow down your strategy and just trying to solidify that in an exam set in an exam setting, I think repeating one of the a few of the OG mocks, I think that it will not do a lot of harm. Just be cognizant that of course your score will be slightly inflated because some questions will be familiar to you.
True, true. And one more thing, basically, as Ashish mentioned, that it is about mocks are for the timing strategy and those things. It's not just about looking at your score. For most people, mocks basically mean where do I stand at present. That's what they use the mocks for. That should not be the goal. Like that's what Ashish is trying to say. That your goal to take a mock should be to fine tune your timing strategy and be in that test taker's mindset. So it's okay to repeat those mocks for that perspective, but the main thing that you need to understand is if you want to improve your score, the mock is not going to improve your score. You have to first work on the building the right skills and looking at the test results that you do for the usual practice also. So if you're
Hmm.
doing properly, like really well in the usual practice, then you're confident that you're going to do well on the mock as well. Like you don't seek a validation from a mock test result to tell you that you are at the skill level that you are at overall. Okay, so that's something which is important. Chinmay has a follow-up question. He says, where else did you practice verbal questions from except OG and GMAT quiz?
For verbal questions, right? Um, I
Yes.
think outside OG and GMAT quiz, I did not do a lot of. I did not refer any other material. Of course,
Okay.
I for specifically for questions, there was no other content that I referred to. Because there's also a trade-off between referring too much content, is because the questions also need to be in line and the same in line with the final GMAT test. You also need to ensure that these tests have a similar difficulty or a similar approach to the actual GMAT test, right? So uh, I on I was, let's say, fortunate enough that I did not need to refer to more material. But if you are in a place where you need to refer to more questions and outside, let's say, GMAT Viz and OG, then what I would recommend is that you know uh, ensure that the material that you're referring to is as close to the original test as possible.
How did you find the GMAT quiz questions, by the way? Like a lot of people ask me this question. Even in the morning, there was this one student who was asking me that how are GMAT quiz questions comparable to the official questions. So what was your take on that?
Yeah. So I think I'll split that into two, verbal and quant, because I tried those, all both of these questions quite a bit. So
Mhm.
within verbal, RC definitely stands out as more difficult than what you would get on the final exam. That in a way helps you, because if you've been solving a little slightly more than expected difficulty level, it gives you a sense of, it gives you more confidence while actually attempting the questions on the day of the exam, right? Because you have that mentality, "Yaar, ye to simpler question hai than what I'm used to solving," right? So on an average, you will feel that questions are slightly simpler on the day of the exam. So RC, uh, coming back to the question, I think RC is slightly difficult than the main exam. Then with respect to sentence correction and critical reasoning, I felt that GMAT Viz, as well as your the actual exam, they're quite close together. They're quite close to each other, and I couldn't notice any stark difference between the questions that I was practicing and the questions that I saw on the day of the exam. They were quite similar, so I couldn't distinguish between them.
Okay. And what about quant?
Yeah, and about quant, I think quant also, more or less, I found the difficulty level similar, and the type of questions are also similar in both of these. Rather, I think after doing the questions on GMAT, whereas I felt that the main quant exam was slightly easier compared to the questions that I'd been practicing on GMAT.
Good, good. So maybe I'm taking the last question for the day. I know we have spoken a lot today, so this is gonna be the last closing question. So did you make short notes for your reference? Again, I believe he's asking during the test. Did you make short notes for your reference or not?
Okay, so short notes, do you mean for, let's say, during the exam, or uh, like while preparation? I'll probably answer both if
Yes, probably answer both.
usually.
That will be good. Yeah, huh,
Yeah, I
that
think
is
that it's
good.
best. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So first, talking about the day of the exam. So short notes I used to make for specifically for RC, but for the reason for making those short notes was not as much to do for, was the purpose of making those notes was not for to refer them during the exam, but more for me to because basically if you write something down, it tends to stick in your mind much better than let's say something that you've just read through, right? So that was more for my own comfort. Coming, I think you've also replied on the comments that it's during preparations. Yeah, so for during preparation, yes, for sentence correction I did make some notes. Specifically, I made a lot of notes when I was doing the first, before my first attempt, because my focus was again over uh, finding, understanding the rules and understanding the exceptions to those rules and how those rules are getting applied to the questions. So that's when I took a lot of notes in for sentence correction. But in retrospect, what I realized is that if you have the right approach, after a point, you don't really need to remember those rules as much. So uh, in I think the answer to that question will depend on what works best for you. For me, I did make notes in the initial stages, and while I was doing the final preparation, the last 4 or 5 days, I did refer those notes. But I felt that the marginal benefit from referring those notes again towards the end of the preparation was very marginal. Uh, so, in case making notes is proving to be, let's it's probably taking a lot more time than you can afford to give, then you can think about not making very elaborate notes if you're following the right meaning based approach.
That's true. In fact, I don't even remember me referring back to my notes ever. Note taking was more from the perspective of internalizing things better to get a better hold of what I was reading and all of that. So definitely makes a lot of sense, Shreyash. I'm not sure if you are able to hear us. Like I see your screen is has frozen a little now. So, Soumya, both the attempts taken by these two attempts that we're talking about, 640 and 760, were both the offline attempts because you don't get the ESR for the online attempts. So, these two attempts are the offline attempts that Shreyash took. And I guess we have lost Shreyash. Shreyash, are you there with us right now? Okay, I see there's I think an internet issue at his end. But anyway, we were at the end of the discussion. I want definitely, okay, you're back again. So,
Yeah,
so thank
sorry
you
about
so
that.
much, Shreyas. Like, it was really, really insightful. I'm sure we discussed a lot of things. We planned it to wrap this up in less than an hour, but you know the kind of things, how it flows when you start going back into retrospection and start thinking about your
Yes,
journey. So I'm sure that the webinar was helpful for students who were attending it today. And remember, Shreyash was in your place exactly like 4.5 months
hmm
back, I would say, when he was looking at how to improve the scores, and he made sure that he learned the right things, planned things correctly, and got on the right track, and he was able to improve his score. We wanted to do this interview with him a lot sooner when he had just taken the GMAT, but he was busy with the applications and still has a lot of applications to work on. So all the best from my side, Shreyash, for the MIT and Kellogg
yes,
application that you are going to work on right now. And do let us know in case you need any help for that. We'll be more than happy. And
yes,
thank you so much for taking out time today for the discussion.
yes,
That's
yes.
really, really helpful. Thank you.
No, Piyush, it's been a pleasure. I hope I've been of little help to other people who are also preparing, and I can also relate to. I'm sure with almost everyone over here because I've also been in the same boat. I think as a parting note, I think what one thing I just want to remind others is that you know while a 750 or a 760 scores, like wherever you are right now, from that point to 750 or 760 score might seem like a very daunting leap. It might also feel that it might also make you question that whether I am cut out to get a 750 or a 750 plus score or not. But through this journey, what I've realized is that from the person who gets a 760, or sorry, the person who gets, let's say, a 680 or a 700 kind of a score, and the person who's able to get a 750 plus kind of a score, essentially your level of intellect and your skill sets are exactly the same. It is just that how you approach questions and how you're able to solve those questions, that's the difference between someone who gets, let's say, a score near around 700 as compared to a person who gets a score near around 750. So if it does seem daunting to you, well, I just, as a parting note, I just want to remind you that it's not that daunting actually. If you just follow the right approaches, I'm sure you will be able to make that leap as well.
Oh, very, very, very pointed. Conceptually at the same place, you just need to make sure that you change your viewpoint towards looking at the question. So that's the main thing that you're aiming for. So thank you, Shreyash, for being here. And
Yes.
good night to you from my side. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you.